Signs of the Time, Chapter 80, January the 16th, 1879. The Great Controversy Between Christ and His Angels and Satan and His Angels. Chapter 1, The Fall of Satan. The earth was clothed with beautiful verdure, while myriads of fragrant flowers of every variety and hue sprang up in rich profusion around them. Everything was tasteful and gloriously arranged. In the midst of the garden stood the tree of life, the glory of which surpassed all other trees. Its fruits looked like apples of gold and silver, and was to perpetuate immortality. The leaves contained healing properties. Very happy were the holy pair in Eden. Unlimited control was given them over every living thing. The lion and the lamb spotted together peacefully and harmlessly around them, or slumbered at their feet. Birds of every variety of color and plumage flitted among the trees and flowers, and about Adam and Eve, while their mellow-toned music echoed among the trees in the sweet accord to the praises of their Creator. Adam and Eve were charmed with beauties of their Eden home. They were delighted with the little songsters around them, wearing their bright yet graceful plumage and wobbling forth their happy, cheerful music. The holy pair united with them and raised their voices in harmonious songs of love, praise, and adoration to the Father and His dear Son. For the token of love which surround them, they recognized the order and harmony of creation, which spoke of the wisdom and knowledge which were infinite. Some new beauty and additional glory of their Eden home they were continually discovering, which filled their hearts with deeper love and brought forth their lips expression of gratitude and reverence of their Creator. Chapter 3, The Temptation and the Fall. In the midst of the garden near the tree of life stood the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This tree was especially designed by God to be a pledge of the obedience, faith, and love of our first parents. Of this tree the Lord commanded them not to eat, lest they die. He told them that they might freely eat of all the trees of the garden except one, but if they ate of that tree, they should surely die. When Adam and Eve were placed in the beautiful garden, they had everything for their happiness which they could desire. But the Creator chose in all wise arrangement to test their loyalty before they could be rendered eternally secure. They were to enjoy His favor, and He was to converse with them, and they with Him. Yet He did not place evil out of their reach. Satan was permitted to tempt them. If they endured a trial, they were to be in perpetual favor with God and the heavenly angels. The hour for joy, happy song of praise to God and His dear Son had come. Satan had led the heavenly choir. He had raised the first note. Then all the angelic hosts united with him, and glorious strain of music had resounded through the heaven. But now, instead of strain of sweetest music, discord and angry words fall upon the ear of the great rebel leader. Satan stood in amazement at his new condition. His happiness was gone. He looked upon the angel who with him were once so happy, but who had been expelled from heaven with him. Before their fall, not a shade of discontent had marred their perfect bliss. Now, all seemed changed. Countenances which had reflected the image of their Maker were gloomy and despairing. Strife, discord, and bitter recrimination were among them. Previous to their rebellion, these things had been unknown in heaven. Satan now beheld the terrible result of his rebellion. He shuddered and feared to face the future and to contemplate the end of these things. Where was he? Was it not all a horrible dream? Was he shut out of heaven? Were the gates of heaven never more to open and admit him? Bright holy angels bow before the Father, but no more will Satan unite with them in heavenly song. No more will he bow in reverence and holy awe before the presence of the eternal God. Could he be again as when he was pure, true, and loyal? Gladly would he yield up the claims of his authority, but he was lost beyond redemption for his presumptuous rebellion. And this was not all. He had led others to rebel and to the same lost condition with him. Angels who had never thought to question the will of heaven or refused to obey the law of God till he had put their minds, presenting before them that they might enjoy a greater good, a higher and more glorious liberty. This had been the sophistry whereby he had deceived them. A responsibility now rests upon him from which he would fain be released. These fallen spirits had become turbulent with disappointed hopes. Instead of a greater good, they were experiencing the sad result of disobedience and disregard of the law. Never more would these unhappy beings be swayed by the mild rule of Jesus Christ. Never more would their spirits be stirred by the deep, honest love, peace, and joy which his presence had ever inspired in them, to be returned to him in cheerful obedience and reverential honor. Satan trembled as he viewed his work. He was alone, in meditation upon the past, the present, and the future. His mighty frame shook as with a tempest, and an angel from heaven was passing. Satan called him and entreated an interview with Christ. This was granted. He then related to him that he repented of his rebellion and wished again to enjoy the favor of God. He was willing to take the place which he had been assigned him and be under Christ's command. The Son of God wept at Satan's woe, but told him, as the mind of the Father, that this could never be. Heaven must not be placed in jeopardy. The peace of heaven would be marred should he be received back, for sin originated with him. The seeds of rebellion were still within him. He had no occasion for his course, and he had not only hopelessly ruined himself, but the host of angels also, who would still have been happy in heaven had he remained steadfast. The law of God could condemn, but could not pardon. Satan did not repent of his rebellion, because he saw the goodness of God which he had abused. The wretchedness he realized in losing the sweet light of heaven, the sense of guilt which forced itself upon him, and the disappointment he experienced in not finding his expectations realized, were the cause of his grief. To be commander out of heaven was vastly different from being thus honored in heaven. The loss of all the privileges of heaven seemed too much to be borne. He wished to regain these. The great change in his position had not increased his love for God, nor for his wise and just law. When Satan became fully convinced that it was impossible for him to be reinstated in the favor of God, he manifested his malice with increased hatred and fierce vehemence. God knew that such determined rebellion would not remain inactive. Satan would invent means to annoy the heavenly angels and show contempt for his authority. As he could not gain admittance within the gates of heaven, he would wait just at the entrance to taunt the angels and seek contention with them as they should pass in and out. He would seek to destroy the happiness of Adam and Eve. He would endeavor to incite them to rebellion, knowing that this would cause grief in heaven. His followers were seeking him, and he aroused himself and, assuming a look of defiance, informed them of his plans to wrest from God the noble Adam and his companion Eve. If he could in any way beguile them to disobedience, God would make some provision whereby they might be pardoned, and then himself and all the fallen angels would be in a fair way to share with them of God's mercy. If they should fail to obtain pardon, they would unite with Adam and Eve, whose transgression would place them also in a state of rebellion, and thus they could take possession of Eden and hold it as their home. And if they could gain access to the tree of life in the midst of the garden, their strength would be thought to be equal to that of the holy angels, and even God himself could not expel them. Satan held a consultation with his evil angels. They did not all readily unite to engage in this hazardous and terrible work. He told them that he could not entrust the work to any one of them, for he thought that he alone had the wisdom sufficient to carry forward so important an enterprise. He wished them to consider the matter while he should leave them and seek retirement to mature his plans. He sought to impress upon them that this was their last and only hope. If they failed here, all prospect of regaining and controlling heaven or any other part of God's creation was hopeless. Satan went alone to mature plans that would more surely secure the fall of Adam and Eve. He had fears that his purpose might be defeated. And again, even if he should be successful in leading Adam and Eve to disobey the commandment of God and thus become transgressors of his law, and no good come to himself, his own case would not be improved. His guilt would only be increased. He shuddered at the thought of plunging the holy, happy pair into misery and remorse, which he was himself enduring. He seemed in a state of indecision, at one time firm and determined, then hesitating and wavering. His angels were seeking him, their leader, to acquaint him with their decisions. The decision, they will unite with him in his plans, and with him bear the responsibility and share the consequences. Satan cast off his feeling of despair and weakness, and as their leaders fortified himself to brave out the matter and do all in his power to defy the Son, he acquainted them with his plan. If he should come boldly upon Adam and Eve and make complaints of God's own Son, they would not listen to him for a moment, but would be prepared for such an attack. Should he seek to intimidate them because of his power, so recently an angel in high authority, he could accomplish nothing. He decided that cunning and deceit would do what might or force could not. God assembled the angelic host to take measure to avert the threatened evil. It was decided in heaven's council for angels to visit Eden and warn Adam that he was in danger from the foe. Accordingly, 2 angels sped on their way to visit our first parents. The holy pair received them joyfully, expressing their gratitude to their Creator for surrounding them with such a profusion of his beauty. Everything lovely and attractive was theirs to enjoy, and everything seemed wisely adapted to their wants. Above all other blessings, they prized the society of the Son of God and the heavenly angels. For at every visit they had much to relate to them, or their new discoveries of the beauties of nature in their Eden home. And they had questions to ask relative to many things which they could but imperfectly comprehend. The angels graciously and lovingly gave them the desired information. They also gave them the sad history of Satan's rebellion and fall. They then distinctly informed them that the tree of knowledge was placed in the garden to be a pledge of their obedience and love to God, that the high and happy estate of the holy angels was to be retained upon the condition of obedience, and that they were similarly situated. They could obey the law of God and be inexpressibly happy, or disobey and lose their high estate and be plunged into hopeless despair. They told Adam and Eve that God would not compel them to obey, that he had not removed from them powers to go contrary to his will. They were moral agents, free to obey or disobey. There was but one prohibition that God had as yet seen fit to lay upon them. If they should transgress the will of God, they would surely die. They told them also that the most exalted angel next in order to Christ had refused to obey the law of God which he had ordained to govern the heavenly beings, that this rebellion had caused war in heaven, and as the result the rebel leader and every angel who unite with him in questioning the authority of the great Jehovah had been driven out of heaven, and that this fallen foe was an enemy to all that concerned the interests of God and his dear Son. They told them that Satan purposed to do them harm, and it was necessary for them to be guarded, for they might come in contact with the fallen foe, but he could not harm them while they yielded to obedience to God's command. For if necessary, every angel from heaven would come to their help, rather than that he should in any way do them harm. But if they disobey the command of God, then Satan would have power to even annoy, perplex, and trouble them. If they remained steadfast against the first insinuation of Satan, they were as secure as the heavenly angels. But if they yield to the tempter, he who spared not the exalted angels would not spare them. They must suffer the penalty of their transgression, for the law of God was as sacred as himself, and he required implicit obedience from all in heaven and on earth. The angels cautioned Eve not to separate from her husband in her employment, for she might be brought in contact with this fallen foe. If separated from each other, they would be in greater danger than if they were together. The angels charged them to follow closely the instructions which God had given them in reference to the tree of the knowledge, for in perfect obedience they were safe, and the foe could then have no power to deceive them. God would not permit Satan to follow the holy pair with continual temptation. He could have access to them only at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve assured the angel that they would never transgress the express command of God, for it was their highest pleasure to do his will. The angels unite with them in holy strains of harmonious music, and as their song pealed forth from blissful Eden, Satan heard the joyful adoration of the Father and the Son, and as he heard it, his envy, hatred, and malignity increased, and he expressed to his followers his anxiety to incite Adam and Eve to disobey, and at once bring down the wrath of God upon them, and change their songs of praise to hatred and curses against their Maker. Satan then assumed the form of a serpent and entered Eden. The serpent was a beautiful creature with wings, and while flying through the air, his appearance was bright, resembling burnished gold. He did not go upon the ground, but went from place to place through the air, and ate fruit like a man. Satan entered into the serpent, who took his position in the tree of knowledge, and commenced leisurely eating of the fruit. Eve unconsciously at first separated from her husband in her employment. When she became aware of the fact, she felt that there might be danger, But again, she thought herself secure even if she did not remain close by the side of her husband. She had wisdom and strength to know if evil come and to meet it. This the angel had cautioned her not to do. Eve found herself gazing with mingling curiosity and admiration upon the fruit of the forbidden tree. She saw it was very lovely and was reasoning with herself why God had so decidedly prohibited their eating. Now was Satan's opportunity. He addressed her as though he was able to divine her thoughts. Yea, had God said, "Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" Thus with soft and pleasant words, and with musical voice, he addressed the wondering Eve. She was startled to hear a serpent speak. He extolled her beauty and exceeding loveliness, which was not displeasing to Eve. But she was amazed, for she knew that to the serpent God had not given the power of speech. Eve's curiosity was aroused. Instead of fleeing from the spot, she listened to hear a serpent talk. It did not occur to her mind that it might be the fallen foe, using the serpent as a medium. It was Satan that spoke, not the serpent. Eve was beguiled, flattered, infatuated. Had she met a commanding personage, a form like the angel and resembling them, she would have been upon her guard. But that strange voice should have driven her to her husband's side to inquire of him why another should thus freely address her. But she enters into a controversy with the serpent. She answered his question, "We may eat of the trees of the garden, the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." The serpent answers, "Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day that ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Satan would convey the idea that by eating of the forbidden tree, they would receive a new and more nobler kind of knowledge than they had hitherto attained. This has been his special work with great success ever since his fall, to lead men to pry into the secrets of the Almighty and not to be satisfied with what God has revealed and not careful to obey that which was commanded. He would lead them to disobey God's command and then make them believe that they are entering a wonderful field of knowledge. This is a miserable deception. They fail to understand what God has revealed. They disregard the commandments, his explicit commandments, aspire after wisdom independent of God, and seek to understand that which he has been pleased to withhold from mortals. They are elated with their ideas of progression and charmed with their vain philosophy, but they grope in midnight darkness relative to true knowledge. They are ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. It was not the will of God that this sinful pair should have any knowledge of evil. He had freely given them the good, but withheld the evil. Eve thought the words of the serpents was wise, and she received the broad assertion, "Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil," making God a liar. Satan boldly insinuated that God had deceived them to keep them from being exalted in knowledge equal with himself. God said, "If ye eat, ye shall surely die." The serpent said, "If ye eat, ye shall not surely die." Satan assured Eve that as soon as she ate of the fruit, she would receive a new and superior knowledge that would make her equal with God. He called her attention to himself. He ate freely of the tree and found it not only perfectly harmless, but delicious and exhilarating, and he told her that it was because of its wonderful properties to impart wisdom and power that God had prohibited them from tasting or even touching it, for he knew its wonderful qualities. The tempter stated by eating of the fruit of the forbidden tree, he had attained the power of speech. He intimated that God would not carry out his word. It was merely a threat to intimidate them and keep them from great good. He further told them that they could not die had they not eaten of the tree which perpetuate immortality. He said that God's word was deceiving them to keep them from a higher state of felicity and more exalted happiness. Satan plucked the fruit and passed it to Eve. She took it into her hand. "Now," said the tempter, "you are prohibited from even touching it lest you die." He told her that she would realize no more sense of evil and death in eating than in touching or handling the fruit. Eve was emboldened because she felt not the immediate signs of God's displeasure. She thought the words of the tempter wise and correct. She ate, and she was delighted with the fruit. It seems delicious to her taste, and she imagined that she realized in herself the wonderful effects of the fruit. She then plucked the fruit for herself and ate, and imagined she felt the quickening power of a new and elevated existence as a result of the exhilarating influence of the forbidden fruit. She was in a state of strange and unnatural excitement as she sought her husband with her hands filled with the forbidden fruit. She related to him the wise discourse of the serpent and wished to conduct him at once to the tree of knowledge. She told him she had eaten of the fruit, and instead of feeling any sense of death, she realized a pleasing, exhilarating influence. As soon as Eve disobeyed, she became a powerful medium through which to occasion the fall of her husband. A sadness came over the countenance of Adam. He appeared afraid and astonished. A struggle seemed to be going on in his mind. He told Eve that he was quite certain that this was the foe whom they had been warned against, and if so, she must die. She assured him she felt no ill effects, but rather a very pleasing influence, and entreated him to eat. We will continue in chapter 81.